Hi, everyone. Welcome back to She Birds Podcast. Today's guest is Gina Heumann. Hi, Gina.
Hi,
Welcome to my podcast. Thank you for being a guest today. Oh, wow. It's loud today. Gina is the founder. She is a founder, professor, author, speaker, and adoption and mental health advocate. Welcome to my podcast. Thank you for being a guest today.
Thank you for having me.
So, can you tell us what causes reactive attachment disorder?
Yes, I can. So my boys were adopted from Guatemala. The first one was super easy, and we thought we were super good parents. The second one was challenging from the very beginning, and it took us a decade to get to the reactive attachment disorder diagnosis. But once we did, it all started to make sense. Reactive attachment disorder is caused primarily by abuse or neglect in the first year of life. And the first year is actually really critical in brain development. And that's when you form attachments with people. That is when you learn to trust. And so if you're a baby and you're crying in a normal situation, the mother comes and, calms you down and, tries to figure out what's wrong. Are you hungry? Do you need your diaper change? Well, if that doesn't happen, the baby gets angrier and angrier and angrier and learns to trust nobody. And what happens is, if it goes on for a long period of time, if they're not getting fed, they just start to go into fight or flight mode. And it's really hard then for the rest of the brain to continue to develop. So a lot of these kids live in that fight or flight mode all the time. And it's really challenging. And it's very hard to get out of it too.
Wow, I didn't even know that at all. So at the beginning stages when they're children, if you don't show them any attention, then they start, sorry about this, they start, oh God, they, I lost my train of thought. so, so whenever oh my God, my animals are fighting. Okay. So when they're younger, they learn to connect with their mother. But then if their mother doesn't show them that kind of attention, then they get mad at them. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. I didn't think that you could get mad.
They basically learn that if they cry, nobody's going to come. So why bother? And so some of them start to shut down and just stop crying. Others get angrier and angrier. And the issue is that regular parenting techniques don't really work on these kids because they're stuck in that fight or flight mode. They can't get to a point where they can be reasoned with. So these temporal lobes up in here don't develop until kids are a little bit older. And if we had that stunted growth in the brain, they might not really develop at all. I mean, if you see the brain scans of a child that was in a loving home versus neglected in the first few months of life, there's almost no activity in there. And that's what kids are learning from when you give them a timeout or do a sticker chart or normal parenting tactics. That didn't work on my kid.
Wow. So how can you determine if your child has RAD?
Generally, there's going to be some sort of disruption in attachment that first year. So if the child is adopted or was in foster care, those are red flags. Like, those kids are at a much higher risk of having reactive attachment disorder. Also, those step kids or kids whose parents maybe got divorced or had a bad relationship in that first year, or sometimes kids who are just separated from their parents due to deployment or prison or whatever the circumstances are. That separation can cause them to not trust caregivers as well.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, and even kids that were in the NICU, if they were sick, or maybe the mother was in a coma, or the kid was in a NICU, that can cause it as well. So it's not as uncommon as it seems. But it affects every kid differently. Everybody reacts to things differently. So some kids who were neglected turn out just fine. Some of them end up with this reactive attachment disorder.
Oh, wow. So
Yeah.
what types of treatments are available to help a kid with RAD?
That is
I'm sorry.
a good question. There really isn't a one solution for every kid. There are some great therapists that specialize in reactive attachment disorder. And we were fortunate to see one of them several years ago, and that completely changed the arc of our story. Now we have a success story. My son is doing great. He just got back from high school. He's a senior. And yeah, so that was really helpful. But we also had a special school that focused on alternative learning styles, so his school had like a garden, and they did rock climbing, and they went on nature hikes and talked about the biology as they were on the hike. They did improv classes for English, so that was really helpful for him as well. But they also focused on behavior, like they did meditation and yoga, and they had a therapy dog. But in addition to that, I think you kind of have to hit it from all different angles. Like you need a supportive community that they can trust and that they know. You need to really try to become a connected parent rather than, I don't know. It's a whole different parenting style where we try to calm the brain before we ask them to do chores.
Right. Wow. I never realized that kids that are adopted has those kind of issues. Like, does it happen for kids that aren't adopted? Like,
Yeah.
that don't have? Okay.
Yeah,
It does?
it could as well. If the child was neglected or abused in that first year of life, it doesn't matter if they were adopted or, if they ended up living with a different caregiver, or if the parent just got their act together. Sometimes it's still really hard to overcome that hurdle.
Right. Wow. So, what types of, oh, no, mind. What treatments did you try and what actually helped him heal?
Yeah, well, I said we did this family intensive therapy with a world-renowned specialist, and that was 2 weeks, 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. It was really intense. It was all four of us with four therapists, and they we dug into our past. We talked about his past. It really was amazing. One of the coolest things they did, though, I call it flip chart therapy. They had him sit on my lap, and I held him like a baby. And he was 12 at the time and not a small child. So I'm holding this 12-year-old. And as we're doing that, we talked about, or the therapist had him do the work, and he said, "Hey, tell me, what do babies need?" And so we made a list, brainstormed that babies need their diapers changed, they need to eat, they need a place to sleep, et cetera, et cetera. Then we talked about, and so then he flips to the next page and he says, "Now let's talk about what happens when, how a baby bonds with a caregiver." And so we talked about eye contact and tone of voice and snuggling and kisses, cuddling, and all the things that people want to do with a cute little baby, right? And so we made that list, and then after that he starts talking about the situation with his birth mother, the situation with his foster mother. And he said, he went back to that flip chart and he said, "Look at this." He said, "You got the stuff you needed from this foster mom. So technically she did her job, she kept you alive. You survived for 6 months." And then he flips to the next page and he says, "But you never got any of this. The stuff on this page is what's really critical." And he said, "We're going to have to work on redoing that." And so then that was one day, and it was amazing because after this therapy was over, the therapist said, "Okay, well, we're all going to leave the room, and you guys just sit here and be there for each other and come out in the hall when you're ready." And I kind of looked at my husband like, "Well, how long is this going to take? I'm ready. I don't know what to do." And so as soon as the door closed, though, my son cried harder than I've ever seen him cry before. And once he started to calm down, he started reaching for us and giving us hugs, which he never did before. And that was like the turning point, I say. And then the next day we did this therapy with a teddy bear, where the teddy bear was him as a baby, and he had to tell the story of his foster mom and his birth mom and coming to America and all that stuff. He had to tell the teddy bear all this and give him snuggles and cuddles and tell him everything's going to be okay. So I think he kind of went back and sort of fixed a little bit of what happened in his childhood. Now, he's not perfect yet. We're still working on some issues, but he's no longer violent, and that was the scariest part, was that he would break things and, you know, hit and kick, and it was really scary for a long time. And after that family therapy and the new school that he was at, he slowly, over a year, started to just get better. Like, we at first thought it didn't work, and then we started to notice that his rages got fewer and further between, and all of a sudden, like, we couldn't even remember the last one. And that was when we were like, okay, something worked. But in the meantime, like, he's very musical, and I think music is really good for kids that are anxious or depressed. I think it really helps them feel better.
It really does. It really does. It really does.
So he also had music, and, you know, there were some other things too, but I think it's all the stuff we were doing. And then we did a parenting class with the people at his school. They used something called I can't remember what it's called, collaborative problem solving. And so rather than, you know, punishments, it's, if your child will not go, if you say, go clean your room, and they won't do it, there's a reason. And so we need to figure out what the reason is. Like, why are they not doing it? It's because they're probably lacking some skill. And so we learned, like, we might have to do it with them like 50 times and do it together. And then eventually he's going to learn how to do it. But it's going to take a lot longer, and we have to form that connection while we're doing it. So really interesting.
Wow. So did you have to, did you foster him before you adopted him, or did you adopt it? You just went straight for the adoption?
Yeah. Well, it was an international adoption, and so it had to be finalized in Guatemala before we could go get him. So that's why he was in foster care for 6 months while our process was going through. And we were allowed to visit, but I sort of figured if I visited, I wouldn't ever leave. So we waited till the end, and it worked out okay with our first one, but really not the second one. It was a bad situation. But I'm so happy that we're kind of at the other end of it, and now I'm trying to help other parents. We wrote a book called Love Never Quits. That was came out a couple of years ago, and tells our story in more detail with the journey. And there's some funny stories in it too. I tried to make it inspiring and not like horrifying, because we did go through some horrifying things, and they're in there. It's really honest. And then last year I did a TED Talk, and then the whole world shut down because of COVID. So I had some time to think about what is my next step. And I really wanted to give back to other parents. I really wanted to help parents like me who, like, my kid is flipping out. None of these parenting tactics are working. I don't know what to do. I'm a terrible person. I mean, you feel really lonely and judged, and it's horrible. So I didn't want any other parents to feel that way. So I just launched a new business called Trauma Drama University. It is educational programming for parents of kids that have suffered trauma. And we're going to have a monthly Zoom session every month. I have a guy who's like one of my idols coming this month. His name is Kirk Martin. He's with Celebrate Calm, and I've seen him speak many times. He has these really great outside the box techniques for like remaining calm when your kid is flipping out. And I just love him. So he's going to be my guest this month. And that's the week of Thanksgiving. So if anybody's listening that has kids that are challenging, you want to hop on to Trauma Drama University and come to this Zoom presentation, because it's going to be good. So
that sounds nice. So how did it affect your family? Like, how did it affect your marriage and the other child when the other one was?
Yes. Yes. Like I said, my other child was easy, which I think was a bad thing because he was so easy, we tended to think he was okay. And I feel like now I should have made sure he had therapy along the way, because his brother was, punching holes in the walls and chasing him with a butcher knife at one point. So, I mean, that was really frightening. And, now we're all going for neurofeedback, because that's also another good technique to calm the brain. And that's been helping all of us. So we're going to do some more next year, but we have to come up with more copays first. So
wow, that's amazing. Oh, that's really amazing. Like, wow. And therapy really does work. So,
and my husband, oh my God, I have the greatest husband in the world, because we've always been on the same page, like at the very beginning. And, he was open to trying whatever. And he believed that, I was getting much different treatment than when he was home, when he wasn't there. A lot of spouses don't believe it if they don't actually see it, but so he got to hear it on the phone. And the mother is usually the target of the violence. So yes, but my husband was willing to try anything, and we were okay to spend our money on therapy just so we could get to a good place.
Wow, that's amazing that your family's in a better place now. That's really good.
It's so nice now to have like peace and family nights where nobody's screaming and
that's a blessing. I want to thank you so much, Gina, for coming on my podcast today and chatting with me.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
You have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.